Minsan, konnichiwa, Samurai Engineer desu. In this video, let us take another example and compare different previous one to this current example. So let us use again the 9-step standard process in order to be able to ascertain ourselves that we are complying with the requirements of the code. Okay, let us proceed. So this is again NFPA101, the life safety code. In this example, we are going to look at a mall structure. Okay. So part 1, introduction. We are with the objective that the life safety code addresses is the requirements on safety to life, mission continuity, and property protection in both new and existing buildings. Part 1, introduction, code organization, core chapters, occupancies, annexes, navigating of the code. So we are part 5. And navigating the code, we have 4 different subtopics. We are now on the 4th one, sample of a mall structure. So designing a mall structure. We have the following problem. The situation is that a 2-story mall where 2 tenant spaces formerly occupied by a shoe store and a children's clothing, each with floor area 465 square meter for sales purposes, are to be gutted, combined in area, and outfitted. So these 2 spaces, 2 tenant spaces will be used by 1 tenant, by 1 business. For a new tenant that will be selling sporting goods, the new tenant will occupy all of the 929 square meter floor area for sales purposes. So all for the sales purposes. Okay. So 100%. So if you can recall, the previous example, we have what? 95% of the floor area will be used for the sale purposes. So this one is 100%. So we are going to look at the core requirement for this problem. So let's do the design process. So 9-step design process we're going to follow. Start at step number 1. Occupancy classification. We first identify that the rehabilitation work will require compliance with the provision of Chapter 43, Building Rehabilitation. The building is already there, but since it will be used for a different tenant, it will be rehabilitated because a sporting goods store is the new business from shoe store, maybe not very far. They are related, but however, the other type of store will be combined into one area of business. Okay, so number 1, we are able to determine. So this page, we are not only able to determine the rehabilitation category of modification, because there are several definitions there, several definitions. So, repair, restoration, modification, reconstruction, change of use, change of occupancy, and addition. So those are the types of or categories of rehabilitation. Also note that occupancy involved is mercantile. Mercantile, the same purpose, because this is for selling of goods. We already know, we already have the definition provided from the previous example, what is all about mercantile. Mercantile is about trading or selling of goods. So let us proceed to the next one. Is this a project or application new or existing? Okay. Take note. Is it existing because the building is already there? Take note. The modification does not involve a change in mercantile subclassification. So the provisions of 36.1.1.6 and 37.1.1.6 do not mandate compliance with the requirements for new construction. So existing construction, because it is a modification. Chapter 43 is consulted. Chapter 36 for new mercantile occupancies, or Chapter 37 for existing mercantile occupancies is to be used. Per paragraph 43.1.1, the rehabilitation to be performed must be classified as repair, renovation, modification, or reconstruction work. The construction of the space leads to classifying the work. The reconfiguration, because you have to make it for a different purpose. We have to reconfigure the space. That leads to classifying the work as a modification. By the way, we need another building plan, because the floor plan different floor plan, so it was submitted for a permit. And simultaneously with that, we are going to prepare for the fire or life safety code compliance. So this is designed for this. So the ancillary design of mechanical, building, architectural, electrical, and electronics engineering plans is different from this requirement. So we are just talking about fire code compliance. Per subparagraph 43.1.1.2.1 and the first paragraph, for a modification, the requirements of the applicable existing occupancy chapter must be met. So existing occupancy. Because of this modification, this is the basis application existing. Now, as the provision of Chapter 37 for existing mercantile occupancies are required as the base requirements for starting the rehabilitation of the tenant space. Take note, we first identified Chapter 43. Now, we identify Chapter 37. Okay? Those identifications should come later, but it is different in this application because it is just a rehabilitation work. Okay? Meaning the main structure are already there. Okay. Most of the things are already there. Sure, there are another updating of engineering plan necessary to be submitted and to be approved, but very small work have to be done compared to when it is for the new construction. So it is a very small thing to look into as a project compared to the new. It is existing and it's just what reconfiguration work. The requirements of the building code and the fire code are still to be complied with, even though it is existing. But the process for which we are going to design, we started to look into the chapter 43. We are going to what? One by one, take a look at the chapter 43 and find out the requirements for compliance. Then now we are dealing with chapter 37. So 43, 37. Okay. And per chapter 43.5.1.3, newly installed elements, components, and systems must comply with the requirements of other sections of the code applicable to new construction. Because there are elements that will be introduced. There are changes that have to be introduced. Therefore, portions of chapter 36 for new mercantile occupancies will also apply. So in this case, in this particular design case, we are going to use both new and existing structure requirements. So both chapter 36 and chapter 37, in addition to chapter 43. Okay. You are now going to observe right now that chapter 43 is somewhat different in application because it is not an occupancy classification. So if it's not an occupancy classification, it is therefore a basic requirement. Chapter 43 is a basic requirement, therefore it belongs to the core chapter of the code. So core chapter, occupancy chapters. So those are the two main groups in this code. So chapter 43 is therefore becoming clearer and clearer that it belongs to the core group. How about the third step, occupant load? Let's compute. The occupant load in any building or portion thereof shall not be less than OL. OL is equal to floor area divided by occupant load factor. Okay, wherein floor area is in terms of square meters and occupant load factor is square meters per person. By the way, to remind everybody that the code, this particular code NFPA101, Life Safety Code, uses mainly the International System of Units or SI unit, but it also allows similar use of English units. So you can find in the table that there are two columns for separate units. Depends on you if you want to use the English units. Okay, but in our country, it is known to be using SI units. Okay, so next is the principle of this code to provide means of egress for maximum probable number of occupants and not to attempt to limit occupants to a number commensurate with available means of egress. So if there are so much occupants for the space, so let us design a commensurate means of egress rather than limit the number of occupants that will be able to enter the area. So that is not the principle of the code. However, there are instances that occupancy are specified in certain special cases for other reasons. Just like in specifying bridges, there are maximum tonnage for each of the bridges, similar to our building structures. So there are maximum of them. So in order to be safe, so there are persons of authority that make those decisions to limit occupancy in some specific cases, in certain reason. So requirements for a mall structure, let's take a look and find out which one is the available occupant load factor. We have the table 7.3.1.2 here of the code, and because we know that it is what mercantile use, from the mercantile table we can see sales area on street floor 2.8, sales area on 2 or more street floors 3.7. We are looking at this column because this column is what? English units. This one is a unit. Okay, so 3.7, and then sales area on floor below street floor 2.8, below street floor, meaning there are underground level, and sales area on floors above street floor 5.6. So it is, as you can see on the figures, it is safer to be on the floor on the same level with street. Okay, rather than going up. Okay, it's even better to go down rather than going up. So this is what is these numbers telling us. Okay, so take note of these numbers. For example, sales area on first above the street floor, again that is 5.6, okay, above the street floor, and so on. So there are plentiful of information in this table. This is just a snippet of the part, small portion from the table. Okay. The occupant load is the maximum probable number of occupants. Again, is the principle. Occupant load is the maximum probable number of occupants present at any time. All factors are expressed in gross area unless number net. So this is the note from the table finding occupant load in mercantile occupancies, where one or more floors or where two or more floors directly accessible from streets exist, each such floor is permitted to be considered a street floor. Okay, 2 or more floors with direct accessibility from the street, it is considered street floor. Occupant load factor in this case is 3.7 square meter per person. So this is also gross floor area. And let us see in finding of occupant load in mercantile occupancies with no street floor, but with access directly from the street by stairs or escalators, the floor at the point of entrance to the mercantile occupancy is considered the street floor. Look, again. So our occupancy with no street floor, but with access directly, meaning the access will not go to other places. It will go to this area directly. The entrance, okay, will go to this place directly. The floor at the point of entrance to the mercantile occupancy is considered street floor. It may be on the second floor, it may be on the third floor, but if there is a provision by stairs or escalator, for that matter, is servicing that entrance door directly, so it is considered street floor. Okay, so with that in mind, in both gross and that area, we should be reminded, but same occupancy calculation shall be by A, applying the gross area to the gross area of the portion of the building. So we should apply gross area to the gross area of the portion of the building devoted to the use for which the gross area is specified. Okay, that is the required. Then use the gross area. Apply the net area to the net area or the portion of the building devoted to the use for which the net area figure is specified. So if the specified one or the requirement demands the use of net area, so we have to use the net area. In this problem, it is not clear what is the detail. So a team of staff instructed by the designer go into the project, go into the place and make the inspection survey. And the data are the following. The mall is a two-story with the area under consideration, 465 square meter per floor. We are just looking at the area under consideration by the new tenant, for which the sporting goods store would be placed. Second floor has direct entrance by stairs, using stairs, direct, going to the entrance door, okay, directly to the second floor. But the tenant also has the ground floor. And so therefore, for the occupant load OL, we have the following data. OL factor is equal to 3.7 mercantile, okay, with 2 or more street access point. Okay, street access point directly going to the ground floor and street access point going directly to the second floor. Because we have 2 street access point, we are going to use occupant load factor 3.7. And because of that, we can compute occupant load equal to 465 divided by 3.7 for the first floor plus 465 divided by 3.7 for the second floor. This is equal to 251.4 persons, or we can use 252 persons because there's no decimal place for number of persons. Okay, 252. And because of that, we are going to the next step, number 4, hazard of contents. Take note of the risk and hazard of the area. Hazard of contents shall be relative to the following: A, the start and spread of fire; B, smoke or gases generated; and C, explosion or any other occurrence potentially endangering lives and safety of the occupants of the building or structure. Because our main scope of fire code is to minimize danger to life. It's number one. Number one. Minimize danger to life. Okay. It is also written on the objective of the code. Okay. Continued, hazard of contents shall be classified by the registered design professional or RDP or the owner. So the burden to evaluate what hazard of contents the area has to be is for the owner or the registered design professional to call it, to determine it, and submit it to the AHJ or the authority having jurisdiction for review and approval on the basis of the character of the contents in the processes or operations conducted in the building or structure. So it could be approved. There is some sort of possible operation processes conducted in the building or structure. So the AHC would approve. Okay. So the owner, RDP would submit it, and the AHC would look at it, evaluate, and approve. If different degrees of hazard of contents exist in different parts of the building or structure, the most hazardous shall govern the classification. So in this case, we are not seeing any difference because it would become one sales area, although these are located on 2 floors, but they are of the same function as mercantile for exporting goods. The hazard of contents of any building or structure shall be classified as low, ordinary, or high. What do we mean by low? It is those area such that low combustibility and no self-propagating fire can occur. That is what we mean by low. No self-propagating fire can occur. Low combustibility. That be ordinary shall be those areas that are likely to burn with moderate rapidity or to give off a considerable volume of smoke. Those are 2 things that we have to consider because smoke are the main killers and the main cause of fatalities in fire incidents. Okay, smoke. So how much smoke could possibly be immersed in a fire incident in that area? And high hazard of contents shall be classified as those that are likely to burn with extreme rapidity or from which explosions are likely. Okay, so in our mall structure, we classify it as ordinary hazard content. So we have the what? Registered design professional. And then talk with the owner, you have to, but most importantly, the AHJ should be able to approve our assertion that it is an ordinary hazard contents or OHC. Low hazard contents is LHC, and high hazard contents is HHC. We have OHC. Because of that, we are now going to step 5, refer to occupancy chapter. We already did that, actually, because we cannot proceed if we don't do that. That's why the process here is what rumbled somewhat, because we are chapter 43. We follow chapter 43. We are guided by chapter 43. Chapter 43 is the main chapter we have first to look at. Okay, so that is the difference between this example and the previous design example. So step 5 is the applicable occupancy. So from step 1, we know that we are going to use both the existing and new occupancy. So mercantile, chapter 36 and chapter 37. Our next step is sub-classification. Again, our special use or sub-classification. Let us consult the mercantile occupancy sub-classification criteria of 36.1.2.2 or 37.1.2.2. And take note that the previous tenants were both Class B mercantile occupancies. The new tenant that will occupy the combined spaces of the previous tenants will be a Class B mercantile occupancy. We can also verify that because of the sporting goods store will only occupy an area between 280 square meter and 2,800 square meter. Because in fact, we will occupy 929 square meters. In fact, so 929 is between 280 and 2,800. Therefore, it is classified as a Class B mercantile occupancy. That is our sub-classification. We are able to confirm. And step number 7, let us proceed back to our chapter 36 and 37 to verify compliance. So let us get the hold of sub-classification and look at the requirements of 36 and 37. And those requirements that apply across all sub-classifications of mercantile occupancies. And we already did that on the previous example, and in this example, there is nothing special because mercantile operation is a basic one. Okay, mostly mercantile operation. So instead of they having to write down special cases, there are much general coverage for this area of application. That's the reason. And chapter 8, find out if there are several requirements that are different from one another. For example, let us compare the precedence. Which one would be more important? Note that chapter 36 and chapter 37 do not repeat the requirements found in chapters 1 to 4, chapters 6 to 10, and chapter 43. And because of that, the code mandatorily references the use of those chapters without requirements on the same one, on the same application, the requirements that would conflict to each other. So there are requirements that would conflict. That is the only thing. That's nothing that we are going to decide on the precedence. Who will take precedence? And if, for example, the occupancy chapter 36 or chapter 37 conflicts or not necessarily conflicts with different requirements from chapters 1 to 4, chapter 6 to 10, and chapter 4 to 3, we have to prioritize the use of chapter 36 and chapter 37. Take note, it is written here, chapters 1 to 4, chapter 6 to 10, and chapter 43. The function of chapter 43 is somewhat like chapter 1 to 4 and chapter 6 to 10. They are core chapters. They are core chapters. Okay. And lastly, we have the 9th step. For our 9th step, because the sporting goods store is located in the street level, somewhat street level portion of the building, there's no additional requirement to be complied with. There's no special. We already made the speciality of being in the street level. That is the special about this. Okay, we do not have chapter 11. Those are for special use. Okay? We do not have those. We only have second floor building, 2-story building, so it is covered. And because of that, we recognize that the requirements of chapter 1 to 4, chapter 6 to 10, some portions of chapter 36, chapter 37, some portions of chapter 43 apply and are required to be satisfied. If we take a look at the selection process of the problem, we have this diagram, but we started with chapter 43 and go back. Okay, chapter 43, chapter 36, chapter 37, then chapter 1 to 4 and chapter 6 to 10. So that's how we are able to design this mall structure with what? Occupant load equal to 252 persons. Okay, this is the last slide. We're going to thank you for having our video. Please support our channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing to us. Please decide to post an advertisement for minimum sponsorship fee. You can also send us support 1 peso, 2 pesos, and so on to fund our free channel tutorial advocacy. So these are our contact details. Again, this is Dr. EP saying engineering is for nation building.